Greetings and welcome back to 303. We are in Senior English A, and on page 61 of your hymnal, we are in the epic, Anglo-Saxon epic poem, Beowulf, and we are now moving towards the very end lines of Beowulf Part 3. Wiglaf is the lone soldier who has decided to return and fight next to his king, the old man Beowulf, who now is in dire need of help. Wiglaf and Beowulf, we are told on page 61 in the italicized information there, will kill the dragon. This is a part of the poem not included in your anthology. But the old king is mortally wounded, bitten in the throat. As he dies, Beowulf asks Wiglaf to bring him the treasure that the dragon was guarding. The section that we'll be studying now is called The Spoils. I hope you're reading with me on page 61. Then, line 775. Then, Wexton's son went in as quickly as he could, did as the dying Beowulf asked, entered the inner darkness of the tower, went with his mail shirt and his sword. Flushed with victory, he groped his way, a brave young warrior, and suddenly saw piles of gleaming gold, precious gems scattered on the floor, cups and bracelets, rusty old helmets, beautifully made but rotting with no hands to rub and polish them. They lay where the dragon left them. It had flown in the darkness once before fighting its final battle. So gold can easily triumph, defeat the strongest of men, no matter how deep it is hidden. Let's just pause for a moment. This is the Beowulf epic poet saying that money can lead to greed. Treasure can lead to greed. Beware of being too greedy, of wanting the treasure and not wanting to share it. Okay? Obviously, the idea here for 2a observation is juxtaposed with the notion that a good king is one who is generous, who shares with his people the money, the treasures. A ring bestower is the kenning that's often used in the Beowulf epic. And he saw, line 790, hanging high above a golden banner woven by the best of weavers and beautiful. And over everything he saw a strange light shining everywhere on walls and floor and treasure. Nothing moved. No other monsters appeared. He took what he wanted, all the treasures that pleased his eye, heavy plates and golden cups and the glorious banner, loaded his arms with all they could hold. Beowulf's dagger, his iron blade, had finished the fire-spitting terror that once protected tower and treasures alike. The gray-bearded Lord of the Geats, I'm at the top of 62, had ended those flying, burning raids forever. Beowulf and Wiglaf together have killed the dragon, and now Wiglaf gets to see the treasure. Let's make an observation. This notion of the hidden treasure, I'm working now at level 2b, this notion of the hidden treasure is a very important literary motif. We see it a lot. Of course, Robert Louis Stevenson's famous novel Treasure Island comes to mind. The idea that somewhere out there, hidden, is some treasure that can be found. And when it is found, it will be an amazing discovery. This, of course, has been a huge part of the idea of the imagination from the Beowulf epic on. Is it possible that somewhere in, for example, the mountains we live in, hidden in a cave somewhere, really famous kinds of treasure that could be worth lots of money if you could only discover it, blah, blah, blah. I'm with you now on page 62, line 806. Then Wiglaf went back, anxious to return while Beowulf was alive, to bring him treasure they won together. By the way, Beowulf will have requested, he will have wanted to see some of the treasure since he knows that he's going to die. Wiglaf ran, he ran, hoping his wounded king, weak and dying, had not left the world too soon. Line 810. Then he brought their treasure to Beowulf and found his famous king bloody, gasping for breath. But Wiglaf sprinkled water over his lord until the words deep in his breast broke through and were heard. Beholding the treasure, he spoke haltingly. Now, let's jump to 3a for just a moment. Do you know of a movie? Do you know of a TV show? Do you know of a video game where the guy is dying, but before he dies, he has to speak last words? And the camera comes in right on his face or right on her face, and she will speak famous words, last words. This will become a huge motif in literature going forward. We will see it often, for example, in Shakespeare, won't we? I mean, just think about, for example, the last speeches in that in that, subterranean vault in Romeo and Juliet, where you have both Romeo and Juliet speaking their famous last words. On and on it goes in Shakespeare. Very famous. Beowulf's final words. What does a man who has lived his whole life as a mighty warrior, what does he say as the very last thing he will ever say? Of course, this does beg a really interesting 3B question. What do you imagine would be your last words? What's the last thing that you want to say? What does it matter? Now, usually there's kind of several things that can happen in last word speeches. One, they can become very reflective of their past, talk about their prior history. Two, they can make some observations about the future. What, for example, they want to be seen done after they're gone. Let's take a look. What does Beowulf say to Wiglaf in his dying breath? Lines 8, 16 and following. He says, "For this gold, these jewels, I thank our Father in heaven, ruler of the earth, for all of this, that his grace has given me, allowed me to bring to my people while breath still came to my lips." Whoa, do you see this? He says, I can now make sure the treasure goes to my people. So as a king, he's still thinking about his people. Notice he says at line 820, I sold my life for this treasure, and I sold it well. Take what I leave, Wiglaf. Lead my people. Help them. My time is gone. Two observations. Let's put it in our notes really quickly. This is valuable stuff. One, Beowulf will say, I want the people to have the treasure. This is not an unusual thing. In almost every town, you can find people who died with wealth, who then endowed some kind of building project or something like that to help the community, right? It's a very interesting kind of way to be remembered. You leave your wealth to somebody else, to the people, for King Beowulf. And number two, he will then turn over the kingdom to Wiglaf. Why? Because Beowulf himself has no son. Now notice, we are dealing in a time where you don't vote for your king. Your king and the succession of the throne is going to be always a huge deal, which is why kings try and have sons. And of course, in the case of some kings, daughters. We think, of course, of Henry VIII's daughter Elizabeth, don't we, right? Notice he says now a last request. Let's write it in our notes at level 1. This is Beowulf's final request. What does he ask for? It will be significant. Let's take a look. He says it. Have the brave Geats build me a tomb, line 825, when the funeral flames have burned me, and build it here at the water's edge, high on this spit of land, so sailors can see this tower and remember my name and call it Beowulf's Tower. And boats in the darkness and mist crossing the sea will know it. Whoa, this is huge. Let's write this down in our notes. Beowulf's last request is to be remembered through the construction of a lighthouse. A lighthouse. Now we, of course, live in the mountains, so we don't really see lighthouses. But if you live on coastlands, you will often see lighthouses. What are they for? They, of course, are placed out on a rock, right? So that a ship who is lost and unable to find its way can look up, see the light, and know how to navigate. Of course, in the region of the country where this poem is going to have originated, in that Scandinavian area, those cliffs can be really dangerous, can't they? And so the ships can run against the rocks, and then all of the sailors can die. Let's write it in our notes as a very interesting question. Why does Beowulf want to be remembered through a lighthouse? Another way to ask this question is, how is Beowulf's life like a lighthouse? That is to say, it serves as a guide, doesn't it? Or a model. Let's point out at 2a then, this is a clear understanding of how we read these final lines of the Beowulf epic. Beowulf wants to die and be remembered as a role model. So he will request a lighthouse. In other words, not only physically can ships find the lighthouse and know how to navigate, but Anglo-Saxon warriors can look at Beowulf's life and know how to navigate, we might say, spiritually or socially, their lives. What is the right way to live your life? Live it like Beowulf. That is to say, a role model. In other words, let's say it this way, the hero of the Anglo-Saxon poem wants to be identified as a role model, which does beg a very interesting question. To what degree do we still think of heroes this way? Who are the heroes of our culture? Do you make a difference, for example, between heroes and celebrities? Think about this question. A difference between heroes and celebrities. Celebrities are people who are known. Heroes are people you would want to be like. For example, do you think of celebrities as heroes within our culture? People who, for example, are very famous in the media. Do those people qualify in your estimation as heroes? Or are there other kinds of people who are heroes? Let's finish now a 3B question. Who is the hero for you? Of all the people who you know in your life, who is the hero for you? That individual with whom you most identify with. That individual with whom you say, I would like to be like that person. Who is that for you? Notice, then I'm at line 831 on page 62. Then that brave king gave the golden necklace from around his throat to Wiglaf, gave him his gold-covered helmet, his rings, and his mail shirt, and ordered him to use them well. You're the last, he says, of all our far-flung family. Fate has swept our race away, taken warriors in their strength and led them to the death that was waiting, and now I follow them. The old man's mouth was silent, spoke no more, had said as much as it could. He would sleep in the fire soon. His soul left his flesh, flew to glory. Let's point out, by the way, that we understand that what the Anglo-Saxons did is that they would burn the corpse of their warriors, right? They would burn the body. And Beowulf will say, I'm now ready to die. And in his final moment, he's interested in that issue of legacy, handing over the leadership to Wiglaf, which of course always resurrects the question of how can you continue, right, the leadership after a great and mighty leader has fallen. This will be the final concerns of the Beowulf epic when we return. Thank you.